What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Neil Young, all things Neil Young. And it's Friday, so we're on the official studio slash some live album timeline. Time fades away, Rust never sleeps. 1986's Landing on Water, his 16th studio album. It's not a heavily synthesizer album like Trans. It's not country like Old Ways. It's not rockabilly like what's the rock? Everybody's rocking. It's sort of a very 1980s sounding, artificial, synthetic, a lot of synthesizers. There's a real drummer, but his drums are mixed way up. I think I read an interview once where Neil liked the way the drums sounded on the radio and he wanted that radio sound on one of his albums. Yeah, so it sounds dated. It sounds 80s. We get some good guitar stuff on here throughout the synthesizer stuff. And it's not as bad of an album as a lot of people say it is, but it's definitely, the sound is dated. And among the 10 songs that we have on here, some of them are pretty good. And I think more so than on Everybody's Rockin', definitely more so than on Everybody's Rockin', but even more so than on Old Ways. The Neil-ness of it all comes through. Like you get where Neil is coming from and you get the sort of Neil aesthetic fighting through the production, especially in the guitar heavy stuff, through some of the lyrics. A number of these songs, and I've said this on a couple albums now, or a lot of stuff from the first part of the 80s, there's a number of songs on here I kind of wish he had just held on to until he got to the Freedom stage or the Ragged Glory stage, and he let them have that sort of production and that sort of band. I think they would have just been successful. But there are some pretty good tracks on here, and I don't think it's a complete waste of time, even though there are some struggles on here. One of the biggest problems with this album is I think the worst song is the first song, Weight of the World. Lyrics are just kind of generic. The production is so 80s, so artificial, just so yuck to my ears. Very generic 80s electronic synth rock. The first song is not a good indication of the highs that will come over the course of the next 9 songs. Things do get a little bit better with Violent Side, the second track. This has a little more of a new wave vibe. You could see new wave contemporary artists, maybe not in 87, but in the early 80s, doing something along this lines. The melody of the vocals, the first line of a lot of the first words of a lot of the lines are here comes the night, here comes the something. It sounds like here comes the sun, here comes the, and then we go off into like a different melodic direction. So that's kind of weird to have that. There's these Star Wars sound effects that seem to come in during early in the song. It's like boo, boo, like almost like these Star Wars phaser blasts that are there. There's whistling in the middle with this solo. I'm not a fan of whistling. I once saw Andrew Bird live. It was like either ACL or Bonnaroo. I swear he whistled in every single one of his songs and it drove me nuts. But this kind of works. The song's about fighting to control your violent side. It's a pretty good song. It's much better than Weight of the World, but I think it's a little more of like interesting musically, even though it's still got the production problems. Then we get to what I think is not even arguably, what I think is clearly the highlight of the album, Hippie Dream. And it was a song written for Crosby, David Crosby, who was going through many struggles at this point in his career, at this point in his life. And he wrote this, I think it was dedicated to David Crosby. There's a reference to wooden ships. There's a reference to like the hippie dream that we cherished and that we wanted to like manifest, kind of died. And now we're in the 80s and look at where we are. The last line or the last sort of verse, couplet, bridge, whatever, of the song is, another flower child goes to seed in an ether-filled room of meat hooks. It's so ugly. It's so ugly. It's a dark song. Screaming guitar in the background amidst this sort of like 80s sterile production. Robotic. It's a little somber. It's got this creeping vibe. It's kind of a dark, depressing song. But I think that when he wrote this, he was friends with Crosby. He told Crosby, hey man, if you can clean up your act and get in good shape, let's reform CSNY and put another album out. And that's kind of what happened. And I think can't give Neil all the credit, but Neil gave his friend a shove and it made a difference. So that's cool. But this song was dedicated to Crosby, and I think it's both lyrically and musically the highlight of the album. Bad News Beat is a fun little song. The melody reminds me of the melody. I think it's the chorus or something in here reminds me of the melody to Downtown, the song that's on Mirrorball. Downtown, bow, 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 bow. This song isn't as like funky and rocky as that. This is more of an electro pop song. But I do like the Downtown melodic reference. Touch the Night follows. A really nice rocker. There is Archives 3 has a disc called Touch the Night in which Neil did a bunch of these songs live with Crazy Horse in early 84. The Touch the Night performance on there is epic. Not quite as epic as, say, a Cowgirl or a Hurricane or a Cortez or a River, but it's aiming for that kind of vibe. Would have fit perfectly on Ragged Glory, the kind of extended guitar workouts. This is still a pretty nice little rocker. It's got this really nice sort of guitar riff, and then we drop into this like Cortez type guitar playing that's kind of a little moody and emotional and that kind of vibe. Really kind of a cool song. Still got some synth pop energy, but the mix of guitar, the mix of how he's playing the guitar, sort of evoking Neil from the 70s, it works well, and also one of the stronger songs on this album. People on the Street, not that song. People on the Street, synth rock, kind of playful. A lot of backing vocals in here, which don't really sound very Neil-esque. Not a bad song. I think if it had been the first song, I'd be like, oh, this is the worst song. But because by this point I'm used to the synth pop aspect of it, I'm like, okay song, whatever. Little dark lyrics. It's not about people who don't have places to live on the street. It's just like people on the street need something to do or something, and out of the alley comes weird noises and blah. It's an interesting lyrics. Hard Luck Stories. Don't tell me your hard luck stories. I won't tell you mine. Synth pop with a kind of a rock edge. Neil's got a really verses in which he's got this really fast delivery in there that's a little more out of character with what Neil usually does with his vocals. That's kind of fun. A little different side of Neil. I Got a Problem. Just 4-note riff. It's like, I can never remember what the riff is after I turn. It's not that memorable of a 4-note riff because I can never remember what it is. But it's this 4-note riff. Pretty straightforward song, pretty simplistic, pounding drums, guitar throughout it. The guitar is at times just outright squealing. It's pretty good. For this being like heralded as like the synth pop 80s album that's a complete waste of time, Touch the Night is some good guitar playing. I Got a Problem's got some good guitar playing. The closing song, Drifter, which I'll talk about in a minute, good guitar playing. There is some salvageable Neil guitar playing on here that bodes well for the future if we know he's going to maybe continue in this direction or go back to his guitar playing roots or what he did, when he's epic. Pressure, fun little song, almost an XTC vibe, more of like maybe a Devo vibe. Quirky, new wave, that kind of synth pop. I think it really works. We get a Max Headroom reference. I think it was this came out in 86. He wrote this in 86. So the Max Headroom, I think, happened in 84 when they took over. Max Headroom took over television somewhere. Or was it Chicago that he did that? Then it became a TV show. But we get a Max Headroom reference. Pretty cool. And then the closing song, Drifter, which is just awesome. Kind of eclectic. Some great guitar noises, definitely like a mid-tempo synth pop that just has a lot of really awesome guitar energy throughout it. Kind of gets really heavy at times between the vocals. At the end, these synthesizers come in, these keyboards come in, and they play this melody that sounds like another song, but like the whole thing doesn't sound like another song. It seems like it's like a 2-part phrase that gets repeated a couple of times. And the first part, I'm always like, oh, this is, I always want to say it sounds like the Final Countdown. But I don't think it's the Final Countdown. But maybe that's what it reminds me of. But there's definitely something there that it reminds me of another song. I can just never quite put my finger or my ear to it more appropriately. But it's not a horrible, horrible album. I would say there's a handful of decent songs. I do wish it was recorded in another era. I do wish the production choices were different. I do think that hampers both my enjoyment of it at times and just the overall success of the album. But it's not a complete waste. And I've seen a lot of lists out there where this is like, clearly this is easily his worst album because it sounds nothing like Neil. I disagree. Hippie Dream sounds like Neil. Touch of the Night sounds like Neil. I Got a Problem kind of sounds like Neil. Drifter sounds like Neil. Pressure doesn't sound like Neil, but it's that Devo inspiration. And we know that he has, at this point, a 10-year relationship with the members of Devo. He jammed with them. He got inspired by them. So Neil's here. And I think that's the thing that makes this a little more successful than both Old Ways and Everybody's Rockin' is that Neil, this isn't a musical costume. I felt like Old Ways, even though Neil's always done country, that feels a little more costumey. This time I'm going to do country, but I'm going to put on a hat and some spurs. Everybody's Rockin' felt costumey. This feels like Neil. He's just making an album in 1986, so it's got all the pitfalls of what an album made in 1986 sounds like, if that makes any sense. How would I rank the songs if I had to rank the songs? I think I've been pretty clear on that. That's what it looks like. Opening track, I think, is easy. The opening track on both sides, People on the Street is the first track on side B. Side A, Way to the World's the opening track on the album. I think those are the weakest songs on the album, by far. Hard Luck Stories has its moments. Bad News Beat, I really love that. Downtown, lyrical, melodic reference, not lyrical, sort of melodic connection. I Got a Problem, nice rocker. Pressure, just some good Devo-ish fun. Violent Side, interesting new wavy type song. But then those top three, Touch the Night, Drifter, and Hippie Dream, those are some pretty strong songs. And Hippie Dream, I think that ranks up there. It's one of the darker songs Neil has done. I think it's a song Neil had to do at some point because he was such a hippie back in the day and embraced those things without ever becoming too Donovan-y, or too like just even Santana-y. Santana became all about the spirituality and love, and you never really saw much of a dark side to Santana. Neil Young always had that dark side, so I think Hippie Dream is something that one day he had to do. And the fact, sadly, he had the inspiration in Crosby, but yeah, Hippie Dream's it's a good song. Where would I rank the album? All that being said, this is a strong catalog, so it's still not going to go too far up the list. I have it down in number 20. Early Days is going to be that like, are you better than Early Days? Early Days is like an early Crazy Horse, a bunch of recordings, which I don't like just because I'd rather hear other versions of this that are in the catalog of these songs. So I think it's an enjoyable, hey, this is an early recording of Crazy Horse. It's kind of interesting. I just don't go back to it a lot in the year that it's been out or the less than the year that it's been out. And so that's like going to be like the bottom. And so it's right below Early Days overall, just because a lot of songs on here are kind of rough, but I don't think it's not that bad of an album. And it's got a couple good tracks, but definitely better than Old Ways, definitely better than Everybody's Rockin'. Though nowhere near as good as Trans and Reactor from earlier in the 80s. But yeah, I have it down at number 20. All right, that's all I got on Neil for this week or for today. I have a lot more on Neil coming up. So anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Leave your thoughts on this album, what you think about this album, all that kind of stuff. And if you haven't listened to it in a while, maybe go check it out again. Prepare yourself for the sound, but open your mind to the fact that there are some interesting ideas here and some interesting songs. And Neil really is drawing from Devo inspiration, and he's open. He has an open mind to other genres of music, so we got to applaud him for that, and I'm going to. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.